Well, since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in South Africa, there's been a huge push by government to sort out some of the water problems that we face. Communities around the country have been given huge water tanks. There have been people filling up those tanks to ensure that communities can practice proper sanitation practices and wash your hands regularly. But around the country before this, there were huge problems with water. In Kwakwa, in the Free State, people had to have huge protests to get attention. In Guyani, in Limpopo, people were living without water and yet living next to a huge dam. They couldn't access the water in the dam. Professor Anthony Turton is an expert on water provision. He joins us now. Professor, good afternoon to you. What do you make of this huge push to provide communities with water tanks? Has it been the right thing to do?
Well, look, this whole idea of water tanks, the supply of water tanks, in my view, is a dubious one. It comes down to the fact that if there is no water, what's a water tank going to help you? Why don't you rather spend your time and money and effort in fixing up the pipelines and the pumps that are broken, rather than it looks like it's just a procurement process for people to go and get JoJo tanks at some inflated value. So I'm personally quite dubious about the value of those tanks.
It has seemed to happen quite quickly. I mean, we've seen pictures of people getting water from tanks, and these are people who haven't had any water there before.
Well, that's good if that's the case. But, water from a tank has got a whole lot of issues associated with it. Why are we rather not spending time and effort on getting the proper infrastructure in place, fixing what is broken, and making sure that that water supply is sustainable? What concerns me deeply is the fact that these tanks are being procured at inflated costs. Tankers are being purchased at some ridiculous price, and all of that it doesn't solve the core problem in my view. So I'm afraid I remain quite sceptical about the efficacy of such an approach.
Before the pandemic, there was a big report by Corruption Watch. It was put together by some experts in your sector. They spoke about corruption in water projects. I mean, we will have heard the stories. They seemed unbelievable at first, but there is a lot of evidence now that they're true, that some people were actually sabotaging water supplies so that someone could get the tender to provide a water tanker. Are you suggesting that that kind of activity could be on the rise at the moment?
Well, I don't know if it's on the rise, but it certainly is fairly endemic in the water sector. And you need to look no further than any crisis that you see in the water sector today. The immediate response to that crisis is to firstly declare it an emergency. Once you declare it an emergency, suddenly you are exempt from the normal procurement rules. And that's what people don't realize. You declare an emergency, suddenly the normal procurement is thrown out the window, then you start seeing what services are provided. And you find, for example, JoJo tanks, you find, for example, the procurement of an inordinate number of tankers, all that greatly inflated costs without looking at the core problem. I was up in the northern part of Limpopo a year or so ago, and that landscape is littered with tanks all over the show. These are government supply projects, not one of which have got one drop of water in them, but the whole supply chain, has been enriched in the process. So this is something that is actually rendered the water sector extremely vulnerable, and it's just something that we cannot continue to allow in South Africa.
Okay, I mean, obviously when it comes to water, the easiest and best thing, the cheapest thing in the longer term is what I would call the magic of pipes. They don't need much power to push water into homes. They use gravity and water pressure. Tanks are obviously much more expensive. Why have we failed to use the magic of pipes to connect homes to dams that sometimes are actually very close to communities?
Unfortunately, the Department of Water and Sanitation has become a cash cow for many of these self-investment schemes. It's a well-known fact that the Department of Water and Sanitation is so deeply indebted, and it has lost so much of its core skills that it's functionally unable to deal with the core problems that it was created to solve in the first place. So we've got to clean out the corruption in the Department of Water and Sanitation. I'm working with a group of people to the Business Water Chamber, where we're trying to create an independent water regulator to simply try and control this ridiculous wastage or misappropriation of financial and other resources in the country. This cannot be allowed to continue.
There was a Water Affairs Minister, Gugile Nkwinte, who once said in Parliament that the department was a mess. His successor, of course, is Lindiwe Sisulu. She has said that she's going to crack down on corruption. She's launched investigations, etc. Do you think the situation is now going to change?
Look, I think it's important that we must support the minister. So we must take her at face value until such time as she gives us evidence to the contrary. So it's important that we work with her. We want a functioning department, but by a functioning department, it's got to be one that is defendable as well. And, the bottom line is that without water, we cannot have any economic growth and job creation in this country. So we need approximately 1 trillion rand to be invested into the water sector just to get us going, the way we were, say 10, 15 years ago. Now, where is that money going to come from? Because the fiscus is no longer able to extract that money from taxes. Private capital can't go in there simply because it's so corrupt and so broken. So we've got to fix up the water sector because there's a multiplying factor. For every rand we invest in the infrastructure, the water sector, a multiple of that is yielded in jobs, etc., downstream. So this notion of water as an economic enabler is starting to gain traction, and this is what we must start thinking about now in future.
Professor Anthony Turton, do appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed, an expert on water there. Well.